All right, let's see if this works. Goodness gracious me. Yeah, I had to reboot the whole bloody thing, man. All right, let's get into the live streams and let's get into some stuff and make sure it works. Hopefully everybody can see me, or it's whatever. Let's get back to the narrative. Actually, we're going to go to, see if I can go to the, let's go to the week. No, yeah, we'll go to the week first. So I'll wait for people. Oh, thank God, Charles Tori, you're there. Wicked. Okay, we're back. I rebooted the whole bloody computer, man. We still don't even know if this is going to work. Hold on here. I certainly hope so. All right. Yay! Thank the Lord. Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just started wigging out on me bad. So we're going to go straight into this. This is for sure, because I don't want to waste. Make sure we're wasting time here. Well, 2 of you are there, so that 3 of you are there, so that's good. The week that was November 3rd to November 9th, 1916. The French advanced to the outskirts of Vaux and gained the footing of the crest. Italians occupy Petit Rib on the Isonzo front. Major Huddleston occupies Coulommiers Darfour. Hey, Telemachus. November 4th, Norwegian note to Germany that it maintains the right to forbid the coasts to submarines. Yeah, hi, William Aarons. Excuse me, a Russian fleet bombards Constanza. It's wild, that here they are bombarding a Romanian city due to the fact that it's now been taken over by the Germans. It's wild. French occupy Damlou. November 5th, French occupy the whole of Vaux. British progress and retreat near Butte de Valencourt and also attack on Le Transloy. Hi, Zoe Dufour. Great to see you again. French capture most of Salicelle and attack Saint-Pierre-Vaste-Wood. The enemy success southwest of Pradille and southeast of Roderturm passes. Yeah, okay, I will say this on a side note again, William Anderson, when we get your ATA, is that I'm really happy that it's a lot of it is about the submarine stuff because, we're going to see it in the week in a bit here. That one biggie is that, as you heard earlier in the week, is that Germany and Austria-Hungary have declared the Kingdom of Poland kind of thing. And you may think, boy, that sounds really good. But the reason being is because they're trying to raise a Polish army. That's the only reason why they're doing it. And it doesn't work. A lot of the people are like, I'm not joining a Polish army. We don't even have a freaking Polish king, for God's sakes, and all this stuff. Like, what the hell? So it doesn't turn out right. But it's neat to find out that the Polish legions that the Austro-Hungarians had were really good fighting force. And I guess maybe that was partially what they were trying to do. But and the second bit is there's monster amount of talk going on right now about whether or not they're going to go with unrestricted submarine warfare soon. We know they are, the Germans. And it's amazing to find out, though, how much lying and overestimating the German Navy is doing to say, don't worry, it's going to work. Look at the math. We could easily, nail more ships there than they can ever, but we'll destroy their capacity, kind of thing. And there's also a bunch of peace offers going around right now. They want to, sending out feelers towards the Allies, but the Allies have no interest whatsoever in doing a compromised peace. And it's almost this weird feedback loop. And it's like, so then the OHL, the German military commander, like, okay, fine. Now they double down, and it's like, if you only just would have, and it's, and then they're like, well, you can see the Allies don't want to talk peace with us. They want to destroy us. So the only way we can is, to go with the submarine warfare. I'm just finding that really woo. A German battleship torpedoed by British submarine in the North Sea. So we're going to talk about it in your ATA, William Aarons. This is great. Germany and Austria-Hungary announced Poland to be established as an independent state, but keep a tight hand on her. Oh yeah, I mean, they had already figured out who was going to be like the Germans guys in charge. Great to see you, Corvinus Wargaming. Again, November 6th, appointment of General Sir F.R. Wingate as the High Commissioner of Egypt. The P&O liner Arabia sunk in the Mediterranean by submarine with 2 people reported lost. The defeat and death of Ali Dinar, ex-Sultan of Darfur at Guiba near the frontier of the Wadi. Fierce fighting southeast of Rotter Pass. The French progress in the north of Saint-Pierre-Basse Wood. In Salicel, the Germans regained ground. 7th of November, British progress east of Butte de Valencourt and repulsed the German night attack west of Beaumont-Hamel. French capture Ablaincourt and Pressoir and advance to the outskirts of Guimcourt. Russian success south of Dornavatra in southern Bukovina. German attack in Prohava Valley and resume the offensive in the Vulcan Pass, however, are repulsed in the Tolges sector on the Moldavian front. German attack at Kibata is repulsed. Presidential election in USA with the re-election of President Wilson. Yes, Charles Atora. Wasn't that a freaky picture that I used a couple of days ago or yesterday? Where and it was a head scratcher for me too when I saw it about the president and the loser, and it's Hughes and then Wilson, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because I don't know, and I was like, I thought Wilson got reelected, so I was thinking, did some weird scandal occur, and then they had to boot Hughes out, and then they popped Wilson in? No, it's just that some of the news sources got jumped the gun and thought, because I guess it was a really close race, and jumped the gun and started posting that Hughes had won. And then it's neat because there's tons of articles afterwards. They're like, oh, what he's going to do, this and that and the other thing. And it's like next day, they're like, oops. I just thought it was pretty neat. November 8th, heavy deportations of Belgians by Germans under the decree of October 3rd, 1916. The American steamship Columbian is sunk by the German submarine near Cape Finisterre. Germans advanced south of the Rotter Pass and captured Sarduis, that's up in Transylvania. Repulse of Germans at Salicel. November 9th, aerial battle between 30 British airplanes and 36 to 40 Germans near Bapaume. And the end of the third phase of the Battle of the Somme, it's weird that they put it that way. Defeat of the Russian center at Skrabova with 3,400 prisoners taken. Think that's in the Carpathians. In Dobruja, Russo-Romanians occupy Hirshova along the right bank of the Danube and Dunaria and fight for the Cerna-Voda Bridge. Malangi Post in German East Africa is attacked but subsequently relieved. Speech of von Bethmann Holweg regarding the cause of war in the League of Nations speech of Mr. Asquith at Guildhall, London. French war loan of 450 more million pounds. And there it is. The Portuguese troops are ready to leave for the European front. We got that done. Poof. I'm going to stop the screen temporarily. I want to show you a couple of interesting pictures. So here's the... So these are pictures from On a Knife that I got in On a Knife Edge, that beautiful Holger Afflerbach book. Hold on here. I'm going to make sure that you guys see it a bit better. So this is not the Richard Wagner. This is, hold on here, I'm going to get rid of me. Well, it didn't really matter. So here's a picture, well, you read it here. A selfie sent as a Christmas greeting in 1915 by Anna and Richard Wagner. In the background is a map of the front. Foodstuffs have been arranged on the table to indicate that the Wagners were not experiencing shortages. And then you can see there, hopefully. Now watch the after. So this is in 1915, 1415. Where did he say? 1915. And watch the next one. Not that one. Well, of course, it'd be this one. Oops. Hold on. I'll find it. It's the after. There we go. So this is them in 1917-18. A bit of a difference. You can see that things are not looking too good. And it says the Wagner's 1917 Christmas card now entirely lacking in enthusiasm for the war. And there's no map and not a hell of a lot of food. And they don't look too good. And oh, guess this thing here. You see this little box? This is I can't remember what it's called, a cooking box or something. But it's a way of you stick, like you partially, it finishes off the cooking for you, essentially. So you put your food in there and it, shut the lid, and just its own innate heat will try to finish it off. And they were saying that's a good indication that they're trying to preserve on coal and that type of stuff. And you can obviously see, I mean, look how they're dressed, for goodness sakes. So I wanted you to see that. And then we're going to go, now we're going to go to the ATA, which is a dandy. Oops, I got to pop it on here first. Yeah, so like I said, a lot of the stuff that I have in there is in the sources and links. So you guys can go and take a look at some of those amazing YouTube videos and so on and so forth. Here we go. Boink. There we are. Yes, and thanks a lot, Willie Marion. It took me a long time to find the first correction that you wanted me to do. I was like, and my mind was just like, wow. Okay, translator's note. Here are reports of the naval war, the first of which is about the situation of neutral shipping and the actions of the British Navy in keeping them from trading with Central Powers and the response of the German government to those actions. Yeah, William Aarons, man, I was saying it actually earlier in the week when I was emailing Harold Bosma, saying that you're on another level when it comes to contributing for the live stream. And yet again, it's the material in what you provided is freaking awesome, because it was a good eye opener for me to see some of this stuff. The second is about the actions taken by the British Navy against the crews of the U-boats, both in combat and once they have abandoned their boats and have been taken prisoner. This is just a monster eye-opener, man. Berlin's latest news, a nonpartisan newspaper, yeah. The 2nd November 1916, morning edition. How long yet? The English fists on the throat of the neutrals. Cologne, 1st of November. The Cologne newspaper reports from Berlin. The violation by force by the English on neutral commercial shipping has taken on an ever more grotesque form. This has been conveyed by a captain of a neutral steamship after it had been stopped and then sunk by one of our U-boats. This ship commander recently fell under the protocol when his ship on course to sail back to its home harbor was stopped by an English ship and rerouted to Newport. There, the ship and its crew were detained for 4 months and kept from delivering their load of bunker coal on the voyage home. As their monetary funds came to an end, the captain finally had to concede to the requisite demands of the English leadership to send that coal to the Italians and leave the port with only an empty ship. This led at last to the sinking of the ship. A similar situation occurred to the Netherlands steamship, something or other, of the Holland America line, which had been on course from Newport News, Virginia to Rotterdam, and was interdicted by the Englanders and was forced to leave part of its cargo in Liverpool. We can no longer calmly submit to the violation of all justice and fairness with the open mockery caused by these infringements. This causes the neutrals, however, unfortunately, to appear as though they no longer have the self-esteem to oppose with sufficient energy a defense against such violations. That leaves the situation in the hands of Germany to protect its own interests and in the preservation of what remains of human rights, that it is unrestrained English despotism that until now has not been concentrated will now face the imposition of corresponding measures from our side. It would not be out of line for the German government to insist and demand the necessary security of the freight and the cargoes of neutrals, particularly those ships flying the flags of those countries. Also, that they are fully and completely allowed to transit to their governed destinations without being either partially or completely to be forced to sail to England after being deterred from their course. Translator's note, this next article refers to the ongoing repercussions of the Baralong incident, which I had no idea about, where a tramp steamer outfitted with guns involved itself in a battle with a U-boat. It came in the area flying the American flag under the understanding that it was there to rescue the crew of a freighter whose crew had been forced to abandon ship in lifeboats. Instead, the Baralong opened fire on the U-boat, sinking it before the U-boat could sink the merchant steamer. Godfrey Herbert, the commander of the Baralong, then ordered his crew to open fire on the U-boat sailors who were now attempting to escape their sinking vessel. The article goes into the moral equivalency of the British and German navies, of course, finding the British to be the more evil. Berlin's latest news, a non-partisan newspaper. November 4th, 1916, a new Baralong incident. The British attempted murder of Oberlieutenant of Sea and a helmsman of the U-41. the inhumane and gruesome treatment of the severely wounded Oberlieutenant Crumpton with the complicity of the British government. 2nd of November, Berlin. This dreadfulness must be laid on top of the indignation of the Baralong murders, and yet again the German people will have received another piece of news about a similar crime and the guilt of England and its naval forces. A German who has traveled from England to Switzerland has reported the following. The German U-boat U-41 had on the 24th of September 1915 near the Scilly Islands stopped a steamship flying under an American flag. During the stop, an apparent arrangement had been made to allow the ship to continue to float in the water. The U-boat lay about 200 meters off the steamship when suddenly two flaps on the ship's keel went up, uncovering two gun positions. These guns then fired on the U-boat many times. This all happened while the ship was flying the American flag. The U-boat was severely damaged and dove underwater, coming up to the surface a short time later. Now, through an open hatch, Oberlieutenant Crumpton and helmsman Gilbow were now outside the boat as it sank again, this time to the bottom of the sea. Despite serious wounds, the lieutenant and the helmsman were able to swim to get to a lifeboat and climb aboard. They now observed the steamship turn around and maneuver with high speed to the right of their boat, but not in a way to take on the two shipwrecked sailors, but rather to ram the lifeboat. There were personnel on the command bridge supervising this action. Then, before the lifeboat was hit, a bow wave crashed into it. After the ramming, the lifeboat broke into fragments that the sailors could just hold on to. After they were left in the water for over half an hour, the steamship came back and finally brought them aboard. Once on deck, they were not attended by any officer. The condition of the wounded lieutenant included a jaw bone broken in two places, a gunshot in the left temple, finger-length wounds in both his nose and his back, as well as a shot-out eye that had happened during the first cannon barrage. These wounds received no treatment, and both men were confined to a brig sail of 1 meter high and 2 meters wide with iron bars to its front. They were kept until the ship returned to port in Falmouth on the 25th of September of 1915. There, for the first time, they finally were given medical aid. The report continues. The German government considers the English government guilty of giving the order that no efforts should be made to rescue any personnel from a sinking U-boat, but instead let them sink to the bottom of the sea. It is against every human emotion to believe in a proclamation of such an order. The English still give their excuses for the Baralong murders and pretend to refute them, if and when they were put before a court of law. Are they not also to blame for the I love this one. Are they also not to blame for the tens of thousands of deaths by starvation of women and children caused by their blockade, which just keeps getting worse and worse? Do they not, as well in the German colonies, put bounties on the heads of German nationals? The Baralong murders are just under another crime laid from 1 month to the next. All these misdeeds are very much the same. The English must suffer a bad conscience since everything they have tried has not been successful. The report on the German officer continues. By the 29th of September, the two rescued crewmen had only a shirt and underpants for clothes while being held in piss-poor quarters during harsh weather. Moved on October 6th from Plymouth to York Castle, the lieutenant, who still had open wounds, was taken on the 13th of December to Dufferin Camp. There, the camp doctor reported that this officer, because of his severe wounds, he was in danger of losing his other eye, should be transferred to Switzerland, where he could receive extensive treatment for his wounds. Despite this recommendation, the Surgeon General vetoed this move and forced the wounded officer to stay in England. Additionally, the attempted correspondence from Oberlieutenant Crumpton through the U.S. ambassador to the German government was not conveyed. After all this, the English government did not succeed in their efforts to have their lieutenant die of his wounds. This led them to the conclusion that for the duration of the war, they would not attempt to cause this officer further harm. This is an admission on their part that these reports have been found to be the truth, and that the guilty conscience of the representatives of the English government who call themselves to be the defenders of culture and human rights. The commander of U-41 was Lieutenant Commander Hansen, who was one of the most courageous and true U-boat commanders. Current U-boat actions, 2nd of November in Athens. Reuters reports that in the last 12 days, 7 Greek steamships have been sunk. Copenhagen, 2nd of November. the Ritzau office reports the Danish schooner Proven von Marschall had been sunk on the 12th of April 1916 by a German U-boat while it was sending a signal to an English warship. Since in this case there was no time to warn the Danish crew before the attack, the German government has declared that it is prepared to provide compensation. And we've got that, we've done that, and we're up to 5 minutes left. Hold on here, I want to make sure that I pop my thingamajig here. I'm just going to quickly look at my narrative thingamajig. Is there anything really? Oh, you know what? I don't know. Yeah, it's not very big. I'm going to show it this. It was just on the off chance, that Hex to Hex was going to show up. If he did, then I was going to post this, but he's not here. Tough. I'll post it anyways. It's about golfers in the war thing. So I just wanted to pop it in. We'll read if you guys can read that. I hope you can. Many golfers are serving the empire. That's why I was like, oh, I saw the article. I was like, oh, okay, I'll pop it on for Hex to Hex because he's an avid golfer. The Canadian golfer, known from figures in its possession, believes it makes a conservative statement in estimating that over 3,000 members of Canadian golf clubs have donned the khaki during the past 2 years. Many of the larger clubs have contributed of their membership 100 or more, and there's not a club, however small, but has sent its full quota of effectives to fight the great battles of the empire. 4 minutes left. I'm going to stop the screen. I'm going to take a look at my thingamajigs. Just may have to go straight off to the after hours thing. I got 3 minutes left. Anyways, I don't think there's much for me to show. I'm just taking a look here. No, I thought. Well, actually, let's go to the bloody thing very quickly then, if I'm allowed to. We'll go to that game you were saying that you have, Mike, Meandering Mike. Hold on here. We'll go to it, I hope, and then we'll go off to the after hours. So it's this one, yeah. It was neat to find out about it. There we go. There we go, and I'll get rid of me so you guys can see that better, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. There. So so you've got this game. I just was looking around. I went, okay, there's a third German East Africa game that we know of now. Remember the other one was that you've got it, William Aarons. Oh darn it, I can't remember what magazine it's from. The Ascari game that you have. But so there you go. Let's take a quickie look. You can kind of see that. Nice looking counters. I mean, look at the registration. Oh, it's wonderful. Nice big whatevers. Nice. Guns of the Ascari. Thank you. And I'm interested. I'm envious, Andrew, Mike, that you have this. That's for sure. This looks like a darn good. This looks like a really darn good game. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen for now because we're going to go. Hold on here, and the decision games. Let the floor back. Of course. So there's 4. Okay, now I'm going to go and grab the link for the after hours, and that'll be that. Hold on here. I got to find it. Oh, it's on the other thing here. And that'll be that. Yeah. Well, like I said, thank you guys, everyone, for showing up and whatnot. And I know it was a wonky whatever, but that's kind of like almost normal. Hold on here. So I've got it ready. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to hit this. I'm going to mute my thing and go straight to the after hours thing of the war summary. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great remainder of your weekend and a great 2 weeks because, like I said, I'm going to be attending the symposium next weekend. So thanks again. I'm going to, present the screen. And there we go. And I'm going to mute myself. Thanks again, guys. And I'll turn into a texter like you guys. And here we go, the war summary for November 3rd to the 9th, 1916. Once more on the Carso and to the east of Gorizia, General Cadorna has hurled the weight of the Italian army against the Austrians and has broken their lines. An official dispatch from Rome states that in a general engagement on Wednesday in this region, the Italians won and held important points on the eastern slopes of Mounts Tivoli and San Marco, due east of Gorizia, and in the region south and east of Mount Pasinca on the Carso Plateau. During Wednesday's operations, 4,731 prisoners, 6 4-inch guns, many machine guns, and much war material fell into the hands of the victors. The Carso is a difficult region over which to fight. It is barren and rocky with little shelter, and trench making is an extremely arduous task. The positions captured by the Italians constituted a new and strong line prepared in advance of the last Italian drive and occupied by the Austrians after their defeat on that occasion. Trieste is still some distance away, but the Italians are certain to reach it next summer at the latest. The struggle on the Stockholm River in Volnia continues on a large scale. The Germans won a victory there in the region of Vittonitz and the heights south of that town on Wednesday. After much hard fighting, they captured the Russian advanced positions on the left bank of the Stockholm, together with 22 officers and 1,500 men. Petrograd, telling of this engagement, says that it was not until after a fierce artillery bombardment, following upon the repulse of 3 storming columns, that the Germans at the 4th attempt succeeded. The situation of the Romanian front continues to improve. Petrograd reports that a small Romanian force operating at Bratochia, within 20 miles of Kronstadt on the Transylvanian side of the mountains, made a surprise attack on the enemy and drove him back after he had lost some prisoners and suffered otherwise. Raids of this nature are calculated to make von Falkenhayn apprehensive as to the safety of his lines of communication. Were he to lose command even for a few days of the railway through the Padriel Pass that feeds and supplies his troops with munitions, his position would be a dangerous one. In the valley of the Jule, south of the Vulcan Pass, the Romanians continue to pursue the retiring Bavarians. In the region south of the Padriel Pass, von Falkenhayn reports the repulse of Romanian attacks and the capture of 208 prisoners. The invasion of Romania proves a very slow operation, and it is believed in Bucharest that von Falkenhayn is so short of men that several regiments from Mackinson's army of the Dobruja have been sent to aid him. It is doubtful whether they can be spared yet from the Danubian front. The appointment of General Sakharov to the command of the Russo-Romanian army there indicates that the Russians are preparing for a renewal of the struggle. The concerted movements to relieve the pressure upon Romania, of which Mr. Lloyd George recently spoke, are undoubtedly beginning to produce results. The high commands in the Romanian army have been turned over to experienced French and Russian generals. Saray on the Salonika front, Cordona on the Asanso, and Brusilov in Volnia all endeavor to occupy the attention of as many of the enemy's troops as possible. The continued heavy rains on the Western Front have prevented the launching of similar offensive movements there. They will be inaugurated without doubt as soon as the weather clears. What has been done already by the Allies has unquestionably prevented the Teutons from gathering together a sufficiently large army to overwhelm Romania in the first rush, as Serbia was overwhelmed. Whether persistence will win where speed has failed remains to be seen. The evacuation of Fort Vaux, the most important of the outer defenses of Verdun, remaining in possession of the German troops after the recapture of Fort Douaumont, is announced by Berlin. The official admission says that evacuation was ordered and carried out without disturbance, and that after the garrison had withdrawn, the French directed a heavy destructive fire upon the fort. The withdrawal of the Germans from Fort Vaux definitely marks the termination of the siege of Verdun, the greatest offensive stroke of the enemy during the present year. It indicates also that the large German concentration along the Meuse has been drawn upon so heavily to make good losses elsewhere that the Crown Prince can no longer even attempt to come back. In the region to the east and northeast of Sailly and Lesboeufs, the French made further gains yesterday and consolidated the ground won earlier in the week. Prisoners come in freely. 736 have been taken during the operations around Sailly and Wednesday and yesterday. A dozen machine guns were also gathered in. There was no infantry fighting on the British front yesterday, and artillery activity was confined chiefly to the region between Arras and Ypres. General Maurice, Chief Director of Military Operations at the War Office, referring to the cessation of activity because of unfavorable weather and its result on the munitions problem, says, "It is no doubt true that the Germans in recent fighting have been short of ammunition. During the winter, with its short stays, limiting the use of artillery, they will be able to replenish their stores. But despite the bad weather, we have no intention of letting up on them. Our offensive will continue throughout the winter when conditions are at all favorable." The principal German assault on the Transylvanian front is taking place in the region south of the border between the valley of the Prahova and the valley of the Alt. The mountain chain that marks the frontier here is of great height. Mount Omo, between the Predil and the Tortsberg Pass, being 8,235 feet above sea level, and Mount Nagoy, near the Red Tower Pass, traversed by the Alt River, 7,344 feet. From these great peaks, the range stretches southward for about 15 miles, while the foothills extend from 15 to 25 miles farther south of the plain of Wallachia. The points at which fighting is now proceeding are well within the region of the higher peaks. Already, there is much snow in the mountains, and the transport problem is an increasing serious one for the Germans. Command of the railways that run through the Predil and Red Tower passes is of great value, but on that part of the front, miles from the railway and located on almost inaccessible mountains, the bringing up of the supplies is the biggest part of the task of the Teutons. The Romanians hold Kimpelung firmly and have therefore distinctly better railway facilities than von Falkenhayn's army. Berlin reports that in this region another advance has been made and 350 Romanians have been captured. The report gives no indication as to the point at which this advance was made, and both Petrograd and Bucharest are silent regarding it. The ground gained in this wild region will not begin to imperil the Romanian forces that lie between the Teutons and Bucharest until Kimpelung is captured. Of all that, there is no immediate prospect. At all other points, the Romanians are in full control of the situation, and on the Carpathian front, they are now conducting a vigorous offensive. Petrograd reports that on the Stockade in Volnya, 5 miles north of Kiselin, the Russians retook a portion of the trenches on the west bank of the river from which they were ejected recently. Fighting continues also in Galicia. There, Berlin reports the Russians suffered exceptionally severe losses in attempts repeated 7 times to recapture the positions on the west bank of the Nara Yuvka captured by the Germans on Monday. The German press reports of the evacuation of Fort Vaux emphasizes the fact that the retirement was purely voluntary because the authorities no longer considered the fort worth retaining at the price of further sacrifices. The Berliner Tageblatt makes a wry face but swallows the dose with the comment, "The measure, of course, is not pleasant sentimentally, but is militarily justifiable. When the time comes to scuttle out of northern France altogether, the world will no doubt be told that the men and guns of the Allied armies had nothing to do with the decision of Berlin, which was arrived at voluntarily." The truth is that the prestige of the German army has been greatly lowered in the eyes of the people of Germany, as well as among neutral nations, by its failure to hold the ground won at Verdun by terrible expenditure of men and munitions. The Italian advance on the Carso continues. General Cadorna reports further gains of territory and the capture of 3,498 additional prisoners, making 8,229 in 2 days. The absence of roads is a serious drawback. When heavy guns have to be moved up to new positions, there must be more or less delay while emplacements are constructed and roads are built strong enough to carry the guns. The victories won by General Cadorna's troops southeast of Gorizia and on the Corso in the region east of Mount Pasinka involve moving up the guns preparatory to a fresh assault. The positions the Italians must next tackle on the Carso are the strongest between them and Trieste. From the coast of the Adriatic at Duino, northeasterly as far as Birhula, a ridge extends that is considerably higher than the rocky terrain over which Cadorna's army must advance to the attack. It is believed the Austrian engineers have done their best to make their positions impregnable. Cadorna assuredly will bring every gun he can bear upon them before losing his infantry. Once the ridge is won, the road to Trieste is pretty well downhill. It is estimated that in Wednesday's battle, the Austrians lost 15,000 men, of whom a third were taken as prisoners. On Thursday, the total losses must have been about 10,000. In the region east of the Struma, on the Macedonian front, the British Army steadily enlarges the area held by it. Litsa, or Ellipsa, captured by storm, is a village located almost midway between Lake Bukova and Demir Hisar. It was almost the last point between the Struma and the railway held by the Bulgars. North of the Somme on Sunday, the French made a number of successful attacks between Les Boeufs and at a point to the south of the wood of Saint-Pierre-Vasse. The wood, in which the Germans have constructed powerful defensive works, was attacked from three sides at once. The French troops captured in excessive rushes three trenches which defended the northern part of the wood, lying immediately south of the village of Sailly. On the southwestern front, lying to the east of the Peronne-Bapaume road, the entire line of German positions was occupied and held against determined counterattacks, which were repelled with the bayonet and with hand grenades. In the various actions, which included also an advance of several hundred yards towards Le Transloy, the French took 522 prisoners, of whom 15 were officers. The British night report tells of a number of attacks along the front in which some progress was made on the extreme right and in the center. There, General Haig states, we progressed on a front of over 1,000 yards, securing the high ground in the neighborhood of Butte de Valencourt. The weather is still stormy. The situation in the vicinity of Fort Vaux improves daily for the French. After the reoccupation of the fort, they pushed forward on Saturday into the village. They now hold the western part of it as far as the church. Immediately north of the fort and to the east, they've advanced several hundred yards down the slope towards the Ouvre. Details of the fighting which preceded the evacuation of the fort by the Germans show that the fire of the French heavy artillery was of overpowering intensity. A shell weighing a ton struck a German magazine on Tuesday last, causing an explosion of many thousands of grenades. It probably did much to render the fort untenable. It is believed that the German lines have been retired very considerably to the rear of the former positions. French patrols have penetrated far beyond the fort, but have not been able to get into touch with their former defenses. There are no signs that the Germans are preparing for a counterattack. On Saturday night, the French occupied the village of Damlou, situated about a mile to the east of the fort. A number of Germans were taken prisoner. The retirement from Damlou would indicate that the Germans have given up all endeavor to engage and hold on at Verdun any large number of French troops. The fighting on the Somme front on Saturday was confined largely to heavy artillery actions around Les Boeufs and Le Save on the British front, and to a rather vigorous German counterattack against the new French trenches on the western fringe of the wood of Saint-Pierre-Vasse. These positions had been captured on Wednesday from the Germans, and after a fierce bombardment, the enemy delivered an attack which was shattered by the French fire. The few Germans who succeeded in penetrating the French lines were either immediately ejected or captured, and for the ground held by the French was maintained, giving a foothold for the advance of Sunday already recorded. In the region between the Red Tower Pass and the Prigil Pass, von Falkenhayn's invasion of Romania still gains ground. A dispatch from Vienna yesterday announced that after desperate fighting, 2 strongly entrenched and stubbornly defended Romanian positions were taken. The Romanians left 14 officers and 647 men in the hands of the enemy as prisoners, and Vienna announces that the total number taken in the fighting south of the Prigil Pass is now 1,747 men. 8 guns and 20 machine guns have also been captured. Bucharest, while announcing that a number of enemy attacks in the Prahova Valley have been repulsed, admits that on Saturday toward evening, the enemy succeeded in occupying part of the Romanian trenches in the northwest of Azuga. While this movement, were it unchecked, would ultimately mean disaster for the defenders of Bucharest, there are evidence that the Romanians are gathering fresh forces for a stroke from the east against Falkenhayn's line of communication. Vienna admits that in the frontier region east of Kronstadt, the Romanians have again renewed their attack, and that the near the Tuglas, the Teutonic front at 2 points has been pressed back about 1.5 miles. The Romanians also continue to make progress on the Vulcan Pass to the west of the Red Tower. There it is announced that the pursuit of the beaten Bavarian continues and that the additional prisoners have been captured. Petrograd announces a rather important victory in the region of Dornavatra, where the Russians and the Romanians are cooperating in an attempt to pierce the Carpathians. To the south of Dornavatra, the Russian troops on Saturday made an advance and occupied the Teuton positions on a series of heights. The gradual pressing back of the German troops, which are holding the front here, removes all possibility of an invasion of Moldavia by way of the Carpathians and greatly strengthens the Romanian defense farther to the south. Hold on, just taking a sip of water. There's been very heavy fighting on the Russian front north of Potsdam. By the use of gas shells, the Germans were able to drive the Russians out of their trenches, but the Russian artillery compelled the enemy afterwards to retire, and the village was reoccupied by the Russian troops. The region in which this action took place is northeast of Vilna. The German attack may mean the opening of a new offensive calculated to affect the situation on the Dwin. An endeavor to turn the Russian positions in the vicinity of Vinsk would probably be indicated by an advance northeasterly from Potsdam. There is yet no sufficient evidence on which to base an expression of belief that the Germans have opened a renewed offensive on a large scale in the Vina region. The Italians continued their attack in the region east of Gorizia and on the Carso Plateau. On Friday, they penetrated a very large section of the Austrian front in the region of Castellavica, reaching a point within 200 meters of the town. Near the Adriatic, the Austrians maintained a bombardment of great intensity and at one point attempted a massed attack, which was broken up by the Italian fire. The enemy left many dead on the field. During the day, 553 prisoners were taken, together with a whole battery of 4-inch howitzers and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition for each gun. A complete transport column was also captured and a huge quantity of materials of all kinds. In 4 days of fighting, including Saturday, 270 Austro-Hungarian officers and 8,922 men were taken prisoner. Yesterday, some 200 were captured, mostly wounded, found on the field of battle. Since the offensive on the Italian front began on the 6th of August, 40,365 Austrians have been captured, including 1,008 officers. Late dispatches last night indicate a farther advance on the Carso and the investment of Castellavica or something like that. The very great danger of hard fighting between the adherents of King Constantine and the Venizelists has been ended by the arrival at Caterina of a French battalion, which has occupied the town. It is believed that the Greek and Venizelist troops will at once leave Caterina, thus putting an end to the dangerous situation that has existed there during the past few days. There's not much activity on the Macedonian front, save in the region of the Cerna, where the Serbs on Saturday repulsed 3 strong attacks by the enemy and took a number of prisoners. They state that in the recent fighting on the left bank of the Cerna, the Germans suffered enormous losses. German battleships are again venturing out into the North Sea. One of them, a dreadnought, ventured far on Sunday and was seen by a British submarine off the coast of Denmark. The submarine fired torpedoes at the battleship and hit the vessel, but the amount of damage done is unknown. The British Admiralty report reports the German. I'm sorry, sometimes I get screwed up with no commas and whatnot. It breaks up my line of thought here. The Germans lost a submarine on the Danish coast on Sunday. She ran ashore in a fog on Saturday night, and as she could not be hauled off again, she was blown up at noon on Sunday. The presence of British war vessels in the neighborhood may have been the cause of the prompt destruction of the submarine, which was one of a group launched in 1912 and was known as the U-20. The French continued yesterday to go forward in the wood of Saint-Pierre-Vasse to the east of the Peronne-Bapaume road. The Midnight Paris report says progress has been made in the northern part of the wood and that since yesterday, over 600 prisoners have been taken. This makes a total of 1,122 taken during Sunday and yesterday. A correspondent of the Associated Press describing Sunday's battle in the district between Celicel and Saint-Pierre Woods says that a gale prevented the use of airplanes by either side and left the artillery fire uncontrolled aerially. The wood proved a most difficult problem, but the German positions were finally rushed by the French infantry and held but slight losses. At one point, the garrison of a series of trenches surrendered in a body, officers included. The Germans, over 500 strong, ran at a racing pace into the French lines and for 2.5 miles to the rear, accompanied by only a half dozen French guards. It was a strange sight, the correspondent adds, when they ran the gauntlet of the German barrage fire. Incidents such as that recorded above show that the German morale is not what it was a few months ago during the attack on Verdun. Early dispatches yesterday seemed to indicate that the Germans had been able, by a night attack, to recover a considerable part of the ground on the outskirts of the wood of Saint-Pierre-Vasse, captured on Sunday. Later, dispatches proved that this was not the case. Only to the southeast of Sailly did the enemy regain ground. All attacks delivered against the new French trenches on the northern spur and the western edges of the wood withered under the French machine gun fire. Last night, the French War Office stated that the enemy losses in the counterattack of Sunday had been very heavy. Along the British front, there was little infantry activity except in the early hours of yesterday morning near the hill of Valoncourt. There, the Germans, by a strong counterattack, regained a portion of the ground won in Sunday's advance. Yesterday, the front between Les Boeufs and La Sarre was heavily shelled by the Germans, but no infantry fighting followed. On the British right, in the region of Le Transloy, the ground won on Sunday was consolidated. British artillery and trench mortars were busy on that part of the front south of Armentières. The retirement of von Mackensen in the Dobruja, accompanied as it is by the burning of Romanian villages, indicates that the Teutons have no expectation of either of cornering the Russo-Romanian army south of the Danube or of crossing that river near the Black Sea and striking towards Odessa. Several days ago, it was reported that the difficulty of procuring supplies in the Dobruja, as well as the need to detach Mackensen's army for the reinforcement of von Falkenhayn in Transylvania, would compel the abandonment of the forward movement in the Danubian sphere of operations. This has come to pass. The retreat in the Dobruja may be followed shortly by the renewal of the German attack in eastern Transylvania, where the Russians and Romanians are conducting a vigorous and successful counter-offensive. The Romanians do not admit any important loss of territory in the region between the Pregil and Red Tower passes, the only part on the front on which the Germans claim successes, but no specific denials are made, and it is, therefore, probable that there is truth in the report from Berlin that the height of Lumu, southwest of Pregil, has been captured. The progress towards Bucharest is, however, so slow, and the losses of the enemy in attacking strongly fortified mountain positions so great, that the Romanians are doubtless justified in their optimism. In Greece, affairs are in a hopeless muddle. The partisans of Venizelos and of King Constantine are more disposed to fight amongst themselves than to unite against the Bulgar. France has hoisted her own flag on the light flotilla of war vessels taken from Greece as a precautionary measure, and it will, as believed, use them in hunting German and Austrian submarines. General Roch, the French Minister of War, has arrived at Salonika. The reasons for his presence are not known, but it is reasonable to suppose that he is consulting with General Sarai as to future operations in Macedonia. A general offensive there during December, January, and February will be impossible because of weather conditions. But the Greek situation must be cleared up speedily so that dispositions may be made for the great Balkan offensive the military writers in Europe seem to regard as part of the plans of the Allies for next season. There has been heavy but indecisive fighting in the region of the Carpathians. The Austrians claim a success in the capture of a dominating height and 200 prisoners, but the Russians, according to a Petrograd report, turned a heavy artillery fire on the enemy and brought his advance to a standstill. Italian reports state that General Cadorna's men are consolidating the positions won by them recently on the Carso Plateau and are shelling the new Austrian front. There are indications that the enemy's lines are being strengthened by the addition of troops from Trieste. Changing the scene of their attack from the north to the south side of the Somme, the troops of General Foch advanced yesterday upon a front of 2.5 miles northerly from the wood of Chaulnes to a point near the Ablancourt sugar refinery. The village of Ablancourt and Pressoir, together with the cemetery at Ablancourt, were captured, and more than 500 prisoners were taken in the advance. The captured territory is important because it brings the French very close to the railway, which supplies all the German positions on the west bank of the Somme between Péronne and Chaulnes. The advance straightens out the line of the French and gives them command of the roadway paralleling the railway at a distance of about 2 miles. The supply columns of the German garrisons west of the Meuse will have great trouble now in maintaining the stores of food and ammunition for the very considerable body of men holding the line between Péronne and Chaulnes. The movement, if continued, will enable the French to force the enemy back across the east bank of the Somme for a distance of 7 or 8 miles and may render Chaulnes itself untenable. There was little activity on the British front. Rain, which continued all day, prevented infantry movement. German artillery, however, was active in the area of Lesboeufs, while the British artillery shelled the German support trenches in the neighborhood of Armentières and points northward towards Ypres. Berlin asserts that the Australian troops lost heavily in the operations of Sunday in the region of the hill of Valancourt. The British position east of the hill was improved during Monday night and is now firmly held. French official returns state that by the combined British and French operations along the Somme, 1,449 German officers and 71,532 men have been taken, together with 173 field guns, 130 heavy guns, 250 trench mortars, and 981 machine guns. These are very great losses of men and material, even for an army so numerous and well appointed as that of Germany on the Somme. The loss in killed and wounded can only be estimated, but it must have been almost, if not quite, 400,000 men. After fierce fighting, the Russians begin to make distinct progress in the region around Dornavatra in the Carpathians. Within 2 days, by successful operations in the valleys of the Dorset and Putna rivers, 15 enemy officers and 800 men have been captured, together with 7 machine guns. To the north in the Kurlibaba Pass, another Russian attack has resulted in the capture of some important trenches, with over 100 prisoners and 2 machine guns. Vienna, speaking of the struggle, admits that the Austrian troops evacuated Dedel Mountain east of Kurlibaba in the face of the massed fire of the Russian artillery. These actions are especially important because it is at this point that the Russians can give effective cooperation to the Romanian troops engaged in the defense of Moldavia. The pressing back of the Austrian front will greatly increase the danger to von Falkenhayn's army should it penetrate far into the Romanian plain. The sudden incursion of the Russians and Romanians into Transylvania would play havoc with the German line of communication and force von Falkenhayn to retire westerly along the foothills on the south side of the Transylvanian Alps. Vienna admits that near Tools in the Bistritza, the Austrian front has been forced back several kilometers by the pressure of the Russians. In the region of the Pergil Pass and westward towards the Red Tower Pass, the Germans still make headway and claim the capture of another 1,000 Romanians. The danger there is not yet passed for the defense. In the Danubian sphere of operations, the enemy appears to be retiring steadily. The pressure of the Romanian and Russian offensives here can hardly be regarded as a sufficient reason for this retirement. It is probably due in the main to the great difficulty experienced in feeding Mackinson's army so far from a railway. The Teutons will doubtless take up a line at a point a few miles north of the Constanza-Chernovoda line and so prevent the use of that railway by the Russians in resupplying Romania with munitions of war. Rome announces heavy fighting in the valley of the Adagi near Mori. The Austrians made a surprise attack there upon the Italians on Sunday night. It was beaten off, as was a similar movement in a frontier valley farther north. The weather on the Carso continues unfavorable for operations, and the Italian offensive there has therefore been delayed. The forces of the Allied powers continue to obtain positions of strategic importance in the Aegean Sea. London announces the occupation of the arsenal and island of Liros off the coast of Asia Minor. It will probably be turned over to the Venizelos how about this? It'll be turned over to the Venizelos people who have secured practically the unanimous support of the population of the Grecian islands. I can't say that word for some bizarre reason. The recklessness with which the Germans are again sinking all merchant ships they come across en route to Allied ports, in many cases without warning, shows their utter contempt for the threats and admonitions of President Wilson. It is inconceivable, in face of the incidents which daily prove their contempt for the flag of the United States, that the president will continue his note-writing policy. The submarine menace has become very much more serious for the Allies and for neutrals during the past few weeks. The loss of tonnage is now far greater than the capacity of the shipyards of the Allies to make good, and inevitably, the British government will have to restrict in increasing degree the moving by ocean carriers of freight not essential to the carrying on of military operations. This will hurt the merchants and manufacturers of the United States more than those of any other neutral country, and in the end may force the United States to join in the hunting of the undersea Hun. The plans of the Allies for the relief of Romania develop. Berlin admitted yesterday that Romanian troops have gained further small advantages in the Tuglas sector, which has been the scene of lively fighting. The Tuglas Pass is the most northerly on the frontier between Moldavia and northern Transylvania, and lies some 30 miles south of the Dornavatra district of Bukovina, where the Russians are trying to break through the Carpathians into Hungary. Instead of dispatching an army to enable the Romanians to hold their position south of the Pergeo Pass, which would involve a very great addition to the strain upon the already overworked railway system of southern Romania, the Russians are aiding the Allies in the region immediately south of their own front in Bukovina. There are fairly direct railway connections between Bessarabia, where Russia has large bodies of reserves, and the region in which the new Russo-Romanian offensives is in progress. And if the Allies can match the German artillery, they should be able to make fairly rapid headway. An official report from Vienna last night, while claiming the repulsive attacks in the Vulcan Pass in the Bodzai Pass, admitted that the Austrians had again lost ground northeast of Tuglas. The effect of a Russo-Romanian invasion of Transylvania by way of the Carpathian passes on the operations of von Falkenhayn in the region north of Bucharest would be immediate and important. The German commander would not dare to advance into southern Romania, even after a decisive victory over the army covering Bucharest, while a victorious enemy in Transylvania was within striking distance of his line of communications. The attack now being made by the Russians and Romanians on the Carpathian front is therefore the best available means of defending southern Romania from invasion. There is little authentic news as to what is happening in the Dobruja. Bucharest reports that the Russo-Romanian army continues its advance southward, while Berlin is silent as to von Mackensen's movements. When the fog lifts, it will probably be found that the Germans, having discovered how elusive their enemies are, and how difficult it is to conduct military operations in the marshlands that constitute the delta of the Danube, have withdrawn to a line north of the Constanza Railway, where they will take up winter quarters and act as a barrier against the invasion of Bulgaria by the Russians. The narrowest front to be obtained in the Dobruja, between the Black Sea and the Danube, is immediately to the north of the Constanza Railway, and there the Germans and Bulgars will probably build their lines. Russia's command of the Black Sea is a disturbing factor in von Mackensen's calculations, for there's much shipping in Russian ports which might be used to land an expedition at Varna or some other point in Bulgaria, far to the south of the Dobruja lines. For the first time in several weeks, Mesopotamia is mentioned in official reports. The Turks state that they routed a cavalry attack near Felahay on the Tigris. Later, 2 battalions of infantry sent up to reinforce the British troops were driven back. They suffered heavy losses, Constantinople says, while ours were insignificant. There's been skirmishing in the Caucasus, but no serious fighting. The Germans on the West Front are now short of shells. Day after day, Sir Douglas Haig features the enemy's artillery activity in his reports. The whole front south of the Ancre was shelled yesterday, apparently in the belief that the British were making preparations for another advance. Second last paragraph. South of the Somme, the French were busy consolidating the ground won on Tuesday. This was done under heavy artillery fire. The total number of prisoners captured in Ablancourt and Pressoir was 659. The Germans, facing the French lines north of the Somme, gathered east of Salicel for an assault, but were dispersed by artillery fire. All is quiet on the Gorizia front, Vienna says. In the Trentino Italian attacks near Bricone were repulsed and 50 prisoners taken. Well, hopefully that went well. See you in 2 weeks. All right, bye.